So when we look at a business, we want to understand core principles. When we should automate, where we should automate, why we should be automating something, and how we want to go about delivering that automation and effectively ensuring that we get a positive result. And so starting with when do we want to automate something? We want to do that when we identify a consistent series of processes that are happening time and time again. Now, they might not be happening exactly in a linear fashion all of the time. They might be going up and down. However, most of the time we find we have to do the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, the fourth, and so on. This is part of the reason I say that if you're under a certain size, it's not going to be as effective, because guess what? You haven't effectively put a process in place to bring someone all the way through your delivery mechanism and do it successfully. Once you've done it a handful of times, this process becomes ironed out, more clean and clear. Now, you can copy something, but your effectiveness with it is actually going to be lower because you don't fundamentally understand how to use it in your own organization. Even if you did the same business as mine, right? So we need to understand the process itself, right? We need to have some clarity. And so when now is a byproduct of workflows, right? Is now as a byproduct of workflows. So you need to understand your business as a whole, and you need to look at the big processes and how they're broken down into smaller workflows, right? Smaller chunks. You don't automate an entire block, right? You don't go and try to automate this entire thing. You take each chunk and you try to work it and make sure that this works 100% of the time. And then this one works 100% of the time, and so on, right? So where do we do it? Where is a byproduct of typically what has the highest potential ROI on streamlining a process, what is going to be taking up the most time, what is costing you and your team the most, what has the highest potential for leverage or just value gain. And another area is going to just be, where are places that we know something should be done and we've got clarity of what that thing should be, but people just aren't doing it consistently, right? If you compare your A players, right, versus your C players on your team, what are these people doing every single time that the C players just aren't? Well, typically, if you're in a sales motion, like if we just focus on sales for a moment for the where aspect, it's typically instances where the sales reps doing the call prep. They are researching the person they're talking to. They're creating a brief. They're preparing an outline. They've got a personal introductory that they use to start a conversation with that person. They actually understand who they're going to have a conversation with. They're consistent with their processing, right? And so on. There's a handful of things. A C player doesn't prepare for a call, doesn't do any research, doesn't do any follow-up, doesn't reach out before the call. So they result in more no-shows, results in more lack of follow-ups, then results in less deals being closed overall. So there's little things, but they're huge impacts that a C player isn't doing that an A player does consistently, just on the sales side, that if we started building a workflow to make this happen for all of our team members, effectively, we would hopefully be able to get a C player to be move up at least a grade level to now be, to be a B player, right? And so maybe this jump from here to here ends up adding 10%, right, of revenue to our business just because they're closing things more effectively. Now, that is measurably not a large impact, but it has a huge output when it comes to your volume game. And so as you're able to build and layer in workflows, you identify that the areas of when and where are typically blocking points that your team is stuck on, or the best people on your team are doing that others aren't, that if you could just get them to do it, it would be better. And why do we focus on those? Well, typically in terms of why is sometimes a C player is going to be a C player for their entire life. And that is just a byproduct of who they are, how they're doing things. And fundamentally, you probably should just identify better talent and swap them out. However, here's the cool thing. If you put processes that can make a C player become a B player in your organization, then if you put those in place and they provide a 10% lift from a C to a B, and you then make it so that A player now doesn't have to do these things, and they're instead of wasting, hypothetically, that 20% of time that maybe they are taking to do these actions, and you take it down to 5% of time, well, they now have 15% of their time each week that they can now route towards doing more sales, right? Where they can now route it to doing more sales. And so guess what? An A player now becomes an A plus or an A plus plus. So then it's insane. So you have a huge measurable outcome as a byproduct of putting the right workflows in the right place where things could measurably be improved in the positive impact on the average team member compared to a player in your organization can show a clear output of why are we wanting to do this? Well, why we want to do this is because we know that we could likely make it so the average team member effectively moves up at least a grade level. And so then how do we go about doing it? Well, we go about doing it nowadays in a handful of ways. Well, first, you need to have the workflow itself outlined. You need to know what it is you're doing. But second, once you have the workflow itself, you then typically have a handful of things that are available in the technology age that we have, right? We have the integrations between the tools themselves, right? Where this is tool A, here's tool B, and we are just directly integrating these tools together. And then we have something like a no-code tool, right? Where we have A, and we have B, and we have this middleman that pushes data from one place to the next. This is typically like Zapier, Make, N8N, right, etc. Then we have the coded route, right, where we're writing code, and this code automatically gets ran, right, based on some set of trigger conditions or time block, and it does the direct connection between the two systems. This one is very efficient. This one is efficient, but the downside is as you scale, the costs go up incrementally because you're increasing your token usage or your usage with their tool, leading you to have to spend more. It's like as your token grows, you're spending more with it. And so it's like a gradual scale. So this is like a nice introductory. And then same goes, this one here is like the winner because typically it's a nice smooth integration, ideally. However, this isn't actually always available because sometimes the way that data gets moved isn't following the pathway or the workflow that you need it to happen. And then the final one is agentic, right? This is the stuff that everyone loves talking about now because they're like, oh yeah, we have got these lovely agentic workflows. AI can do everything. Yes, it can do a lot. But with this model, typically, right, you've got a series of folders, and inside these folders, these are all folders, by the way, you have documented processes that help to clarify the when, the where, the why, and the how something is being done. And this effectively is using the coded route. However, we're layering top-level context of the process, ourself, and our business, and what it is, what the role is, and then it's using both of these together to then run the code that needs to run to do the connections between the two tools or mini tools, whatever they are. And so this also is a great model. However, the issue that most of you will find is that while this thing works really, the issue is it's going to measurably scale similar to the no-code pool piece as it takes a lot of tokens, right? It's going to take a lot of tokens to do this. And it's like, you're like, okay, great. I'm saving all of this time. So maybe I can eat this cost because I have all of this gain here. However, this is not always the route most businesses should take. In fact, I would argue most businesses should be in coded route if you've got a clear enough process. And the reason for that is that code can be hosted. It's on the lovely interwebs, right? It's on the interwebs or it's on your local machine. That's our little machine here. That's our screen, right? And it can run in either of these instances to do said action. AI can do the same thing. And we could go down that route of like, oh, you're using your own local AI to bridge this gap and create like a nice cycle between them all. However, that's fairly technical to do effectively to replace a key aspect of your business. So instead, I recommend the following pathway. If you're wanting to start using automation or you're wanting to start embedding automations in your business, I would go likely the following route. It's not the most efficient, but it's likely going to be the safest for you if you're wanting to make a measurable impact as quickly and efficiently as possible, minimizing your downside risk. And that's going to be step 1, outline your workflow. Step 2, build it with a no-code system, right? This is like your proof of concept. This thing validates that you can actually fundamentally make an impact on your workflow. If you can make an impact on your workflow, you can then take this no-code system and then you can give that potentially to an AI model, right? Because most people don't know how to develop it, seems like these days. You can give it to an AI model and it will write the code that does the same thing. And so now you've got a script that can be ran, as we are mentioning, and the cost is like basically zero. You know what I mean? It's effectively zero in comparison. This, if you're doing anything at scale, I mean, you're probably spending 200 to, holy smokes, guys, 200 to like 350 a month, probably, just on the automations running. Where this, I mean, it's going to be, I don't know, maybe $15, maybe $50, maybe on the high end. Most of the time, you could probably just self-host and it's going to cost zero outside of the electricity you're using to run it. And then if you really want to get fancy, where you have a series of these workflows, but you only want them to trigger at certain times and you want to start layering in AI, partly because you just want to sound cool and say you're an AI native business, you can then take the workflows. You can take the workflows, right? You've got workflow 1, workflow 2, workflow 3. You then take your documented context of each, right? And then you give this to a central AI that understands the documented process. And this documented process says when, where, how, why, what to do, what is expected, what's the end result, how to validate, how to do, how to look at errors, how to mediate, how to notate, how to follow up. There's a lot in it, right, for this code. And so what happens is that this AI model, or this AI, really like a Claude MD file we'll use, is given to your AI. It reads this, it understands the conceptual process here, then uses a series of code and basic internal logic to then run the corresponding workflow based on that, and then it looks at the referenceable documentation, then it runs the actual script itself. So it's not doing the actual automating work, it is just calling the code that should do the work for you. And then AI takes that output and sends it to you, right? Here's you, or sends it back to the computer or the tool, right? So this is my long-winded route of saying, tier it. You go from nothing to something to coded to potentially agentic, and then probably we'll come back to coded and realize that that's probably the more efficient route. So fundamentally, you now understand the typical working process. Now let's dive into a few things more specifically. And I want to visualize this so that we've got some, like a written process. Again, I've got a document that I've attached below. And if this has been helpful to you as so far, we're like 25 minutes in, so I appreciate you even staying as far as you have. Don't forget to like, subscribe, put a comment down below if you have any questions, need feedback or input. So here is that process, right? We outline things. We map your process, your workflow. We identify where the time is going. We run those tasks through your internal filter. You find the issues. You score what is likely going to have the biggest impact versus the effort it's going to take to do the work and or implement the workflow itself. And then you validate the readiness and the aspect of it is like, is it good enough? Is it worth actually putting in place? So by now you should have a structurally fundamental understanding of how you're going to leverage automation, AI, embedding workflows and processes into your business. Now let's actually get to the whole point of what you wanted to get to, which is the different workflows I recommend. So I like to start with sales. Sales is king. Guess what? Sales makes everything else happen. Onboarding doesn't matter. Delivery doesn't matter. Marketing doesn't matter per se. Client success doesn't matter. Because guess what? If you don't have a client, if you don't have a business, then none of the rest of it, none of it is important. Like you need to have sales in order for something to occur, right? Otherwise, you're just doing random shit to do it. So focus on sales first. Sales is going to have the biggest measurable impact on yourself and your business, and allow all the other things to show the weaknesses and the problems that you're already dealing with, and then force you to have to put processes in place to make them run more efficiently. All right, so let's go to the ones that are like pretty straightforward. These things, honestly, you should be able to just build pretty straightforward. Most like professional services firms have these things as basic fundamental areas that if you just started fixing them today, you would have a positive result, which is lead capture from website forms, auto syncing to your CRM. The amount of people who have form data, get forms, and don't properly track source data so that way you know what channels to focus in on more is an issue. Predominantly because most businesses, even when they're sub $10 million, have like 7 channels that they're trying to do it rather than like 1 or 2. Automated follow-up. This such an easy win. It really, I should add in here, automated sequences before and after discovery calls. When someone comes in, you should already have a series of messages that should go out to warm the prospect, provide in credibility and validation, and mitigate any of the key concerns that you typically are dealing with in your calls. Oh, I'm not ready yet, or I don't know if I can trust you guys, or oh, that sounds expensive, or I don't trust how you're going to deliver. I don't know, whatever your question that you deal with or that you have. So mitigate those things. Show proof of results. Show success stories. Talk about a client who's excited about working with you and then the outcomes that they had within X amount of time, right? So, measurable results, whatever it is, show that before and show that after. Now, the benefit of the after stuff, it doesn't always have to be directly relevant to the call itself. It could just be like, hey, hope you had a great time in our call today. I really appreciate you connecting. I just wanted to share with you another one of our success stories. Susie May, she has her business. She came in and she was in a similar situation with you. She talked to us and dealing with XYZ. And she found that after we went through and did our audit, because like, let's say a lot of businesses in their discovery call say that we're going to do an audit and then we need to connect. We need to access tools and infrastructure, right? We go, hey, Susie May, we did an audit for her and we identified that she's losing $60,000 a month in burn because of connecting the wrong tools. The data was going in the wrong place, leading her the time of her team jumping between tools, right? So she's got a 15-person team. Each person's wasting at least 5 hours a week moving data around. Then they're wasting time before and after calls or handoff and delivery and so on and so forth, right? And so then you can extrapolate the value that could be created really quickly and show them a window in the outcomes that they could get just by having you help them in the first few steps. Not to mention talking about that full life cycle aspect of what it's like working with you and the potential outcomes that people can see. Calendar booking links with intake questions attached. Little thing. Don't just put questions that have questions. Think through the questions that you want so that way you can automate certain responses and route to certain stories or examples or follow-ups that should be had based on the information they give. So you don't want to give the same story if you're talking to a surgeon versus talking to, health and wellness sales coach. Yes, they're both in the healthcare space-ish. Really, one's health and wellness, one's healthcare. They both fundamentally have different archetypes that should have a different character or reference point that is talked about. Lead scoring. This is a little thing, but this is actually really helpful. Look, these are all really straightforward things. They don't require AI. They just require having put basic processes in place. But little things like this make your business run more efficiently in each of the key areas. Then proposal templates. The amount of people who do not leverage a templated process for their proposals is astonishing. If you just simply start by creating more of a structured flow for generating your proposals, streamlining and professionalizing your proposals and quoting, it's going to make you and the rest of your team consistently output the same quality or better for every opportunity that comes through. Just doing these things, you could see a solid, I would say you should see at least a 5 to 12% improvement. I would argue you should be sitting at a minimum of a 10% increase just by putting these things in place and then using this base logic to build some other workflows to keep things connected. So what are some really cool ones that you can do? Maybe using AI or the coded route. One of my favorites is pre-call intelligence. This here fundamentally is something that a sales rep that's an A player does a lot themselves already. They're looking at the person, they're doing some review, they're validating who they are, and they're preparing themselves mentally for that conversation to ensure that they have the highest likelihood of closing and positively moving that person forward. And so a C player doesn't do this. And then it just gets worse, right? The F player probably doesn't even show up to the call, for fuck's sake. So there's fundamentally an easy thing that could be done. This could simply just look at the calendar booking details, automated follow-up, and the lead capture stuff, and this other information, the lead scoring, and take all of that to provide you some pre-call intelligence of like, here's who they are, here's what they do, here's what we expect their problems to be, here's how it relates to other clients, here's a couple reference clients within our database that you should reference if necessary, if they want to see example case studies and so on. That's sort of how this pre-call intelligence can run. Conversation intelligence that auto-updates deal records. This is a little one, and honestly, it's a little but a big one, is after every call, you should take that transcript, get that transcript, right? And that data should be sent to your CRM. And what this allows you to do is to start having cleaner logging and tracking of what actually is happening with each of your records and each opportunity, especially if you've got a longer life cycle. This visibility and this information is going to be helpful because I can guarantee you almost no one is effectively putting notes and logging what's happening with each opportunity that you've got. Final 3 or final 2 here on this is going to be automated proposals. You should be able to take this information to then build this workflow because you've got the whole call itself. You've got the transcript. You've got the context. You've got the general information of who they are, lead capture data, the information you can get from them online. You should have enough of a structured process to quickly put together a V1, even if it needs to be curated a little bit more thereafter. However, that V1 should be able to just pull all of that, automatically structure it together, put it into a PDF or a Word doc or, an actual more structured like PowerPoint design, whatever your preference is. But there is no reason all 3 of these things cannot bridge to each other and then layer and add value to you and your team as each workflow is connected. And this little one here is like a game changer, especially if you've got a high volume amount of accounts that come through. Is if you've had your business for a couple of years, there's going to be stalled deals. There's going to be deals that are closed lost, right? Or closed won that have just like not bought from you again, that could be bought, that could come and buy from you again in the future. More importantly, deals that just were dead in the water out of the gate that we could actually engage with and redrive these people back into your workflows and back into your systems. So this can be something as far as like an automated series of messages, emails, WhatsApps, calls, LinkedIn outreaches. There's a bunch of different actions that could be done to re-engage the conversation and drive things forward. So we fundamentally understand sales areas of opportunity. Let's go into onboarding because onboarding is a big piece. So what happens, right, is you've got your sales rep. They've done all of this work to get the money going. And then typically you've got Joe Schmo, right? This is you and your team. And we've got the sales rep over here. He's super happy that he got this work. And then he's like, hey guys, here's the project. Good luck, right? And then these people go, what the fuck is this, right? Typically, they go, wow, why'd you sell all of that? I didn't want to do all of that. We can't do this, right? And this happens surprisingly more often depending on the business. And then they're just sitting here wondering what's going on. And more importantly, they go, oh, it closed. Start working with them. That's it. That's literally it. There's not been any conversation. There's not been any back and forth. And onboarding, if not handled well, immediately means that the money that was going to be closed is effectively lost right out of the gate. And so then they claw it back, or you just don't keep the opportunity and do the project. So onboarding is a key area that, if executed correctly, leads to a lot of opportunity for your business. So onboarding, I recommend at least starting here with these types of workflows. And if you start here and start doing this, I think you'll start doing a better job of just handling and managing handoffs between yourself and the sales team to your internal delivery team. Because this isn't them even delivering, this is just them making sure they have the full context and understanding of what it is that's being done, what is the expected deliverables, who are they engaging with, when are they engaging with them, what's the process, right? What's the expected outcomes? Where are we starting? How are we going to get there? What tools are we connecting with, right? There's a lot that happens here that if it's not baked in correctly, you're just going to lose the deal dead in the water. So welcome email when the deal closes. Welcome email plus Slack messaging on deal close, solid. Automatic contract and invoice generation, solid. Most times you should probably already have received your first payment. So invoice should already have been generated and the contract should have already been signed prior. But you want to have this information saved somewhere. You then want to make sure you've got calendar invites immediately before, technically it should be before the sales rep ever leaves the fucking closing call. His calendar invite should already be saved and locked in. But that's just a thing that you should do process-wise. But this, you should be like, hey, sales rep, where's the kickoff call? Because I don't want to be waiting in an email chain for 6 weeks for us to just magically align calendars when you could have just closed them and moved them forward in that call itself. Little one, Slack, Teams, Google, whatever you use, you should probably have some type of instant messaging channel if you would like. Depends on your business and how you like to deliver things. But have something that gives them this feeling of immediate control or access to you, even if you restrain it into a certain time frame. Because just having this available, you can embed AI now and be like, hey, Susie, thanks for sending us a message. We're in a meeting right now. I'm going to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for shooting this over, right? But it's just the fact of them having this feeling of access really bridges the gap and allows them to feel like they're human rather than just, okay, it's email only. Fuck you. I'm only going to talk to you when I feel like it, right? And final, easy one here, project structuring. If you don't have a good structure of how you're going to capture the data, store the information, have some type of standard process. I don't even know how you're going to deliver and get beyond like even 50K a month, because if you don't have standard processing, you're going to get freaking frustrated really quickly. And I bet if you're consistently stuck at like 10, 20, 30, 40K a month, it's probably because you're doing almost none of these things effectively or at all or ever. And even if you're at like $1 million, I easily see $1 million. People just don't do certain things, or they do them, but it's so manual, it takes like 20 years for them to get this going. So we've talked about those. Now let's get into the ones that I think once you've got the base pieces together, you should look at doing. Full kickoff packet. As soon as a client closes, you should have an entire document that you can share with them that sets the expectations, that sets the ground floor of here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, here's when we're doing it. And it's going to be sent not only to the end client, but also to your team internally. You're then going to have a dedicated process for intaking that client and all of their necessary information. Typically in the sales process, you don't get all of this. You probably still have a few things that are honestly questions, unless it's like an enterprise deal and it takes a longer time to close that loop. And then you've probably actually had a lot more of these questions done. However, even then, you should still intake customers. You should still have some type of dedicated process, whether it's live on a call or it's through a series of forms, right? And these series of forms is required for them to pass over information, whether it's links to Google Drives, links to, or passwords to products or files or documents or general information or who to talk to or who am I invoicing for billing and who can be available for all of the calls, who's my main point of contact for XYZ situation, etc. Like this stuff, as soon as a kickoff packet's generated, this can be an email and be like, hey, John, hey, Susie, here, please fill this out. It'll help. This is effectively the same thing as this, but typically there's unique internal documentation that should be done and shared with the team. So that way they are not sitting there twiddling their thumbs and you can actually get something done, right? You want to mitigate these questions and get them to moving forward faster rather than later on. Because even if ideally you're able to close the gap on delivery as quickly as possible, because the faster you can deliver and the faster you can complete the project, assuming it's not just a time-based thing and you're charging based on your hours, which I would highly recommend you not doing, is you're going to generate way more sales because they're delivering faster and more effectively. Here's an easy one. This is something that the account manager and salesperson should be assisting in, but helping to set the expectations and cadence of what's going to happen. Like, hey, in this upcoming call, we're going to do this and this. After, expect this and this to be done. And so that way they've got some contextual concept and clarity around what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what's coming up. And you don't leave them sitting there asking questions of, oh, well, what are you doing next? Because as soon as you let them get into that direction of wondering what you're doing next, what's going to happen is they're going to go, what are they doing? Huh? Why do I have to ask these questions? I should just know, right? And be a happy little customer, knowing that their little team, right? Team of minions, we'll call it, over here is doing shit. And so do these things. Like it is such an easy win. If you don't do them, and then you start doing them, I guarantee you're going to start seeing a better result in your business. Finally, delivery. Look, it is the bane of everyone's existence because it's the whole reason you have the business in the first place. Because guess what? This means that you're solving a problem, which means it's probably not always an easy thing to execute, but there's a reason you're getting paid for it. But guess what? Anyone who's doing something consistently should be able to process and create a strategic pathway towards doing the same thing as effectively as possible time and time again. Easy little ways to do this, which lead into that conversation of understanding when, where, how, why, right? Is starting to time track. If you aren't time tracking, even if you invoice based on value, right? You're not doing hour-based tracking. But if you don't understand how much time it takes to do something, you're missing out on an opportunity to understand, first off, the amount of workload that your team is taking on, the actual capacity of your team based on the available hours that you're paying for, and ensuring that the expectations that you're setting with your employees and your client are properly being met. Because if you do something and you say internally it should only take you 10 hours, but it took someone 20, first you got to know what the heck happened. Why did it take that long? And if it's consistently taking them 20 hours, is there something in that process that they're doing consistently that we can streamline and automate, or build a workflow that they can then follow, that we can then validate, that we can then implement a workflow to have them have done automatically or help cut some of that time? This other one here, project status dashboards. This is actually a really good win. Most of the time, a client actually is never going to look at these dashboards, but what these do is these really lean into streamlining the conversation for your account manager, right? You have your AM in here, and sometimes they're jumping between 10, 15 accounts, right? So they got 10 to 15 accounts that they're managing. They should, but they don't always remember everything that happened. And so being able to have a call that can be sort of ran by using your project status dashboards makes your process so much easier and allows you to have a much more credible and structured business as a result of it. Because a person is going to say the right things at the right time without overstating something less often. Next, recurring meeting reminders. Such an easy win. And frankly, if you don't use meeting reminders, even if, look, they're already a client, they're already working with you, but you need to remind them that a meeting's happening because you want to know if you need to schedule something, replace something. And if possible, you want to set expectations going into that call. Because even just that added communication shows that you're active, shows that you're working, and communication typically wins versus someone not just straight up not communicating. And so having some type of meeting reminder that feels personal, not just the automatic ones, is a nice win. Maybe it comes from the account manager and it's automatically being sent out, where it's like, hey, Susie, looking forward to our call today at 3 p.m. I just want to let you know we're going to cover these things. We've got a handful of other pieces and we'll be able to go into any questions, comments, concerns that you've got. So excited to have you in the call. I'll talk with you soon. Something as simple as that. It can be the same basic structure every time, pulling from your status dashboard. That way it's templated, but different every email or every time you're sending it. And then a little one, this is something that just should automatically be done. Like file sharing notifications. When you send data, you should just, be able to notate something is happening. This is like a little thing. This is more like an internal process optimization piece, just so your team internally knows what's happening. And then finally, your task assignment. If you don't have a PM tool, I understand it's a pain, it's a lot of work, but having something to help with PM is going to make your life easier, because having a way to assign tasks cleanly and efficiently is going to make your processes just so much easier, because everyone's going to know what they need to do, when they need to do it, how they need to do it, why they need to do it, who they're doing it for, and how to go about doing that thing. And so clarity is key. This leads into this, which leads into all the other shit that's here. Great. So at this point, if you already did all of these things, if you are not a $2 million+ a year business, you are clearly setting the right foundations in place to be able to handle the workload to get you there. Now, these are other really cool ones. Personally, have found a lot of benefit in. AI drafted weekly client updates. This is something that we technically would have a human in the loop for, but this can look at your PM dashboard, right? And then it goes to your AM, right? You have your AM here, and it's a drafted email for them. Part of this process is that they should look at the PM, confirm the details, make sure that it communicates everything cleanly and efficiently. And then when they're happy with it, they can then send it over to the client. Here's that client. This just keeps the loop. Like, it's positively reinforcing feedback of positive progress of moving things forward. This allows things to move efficiently. Scope creep detection. This is a really good one. This I find typically does not come from tasks that are in your property management or project management system, but actually comes from your calls that your team is having. So this is where you store the calls, transcripts, and you cyclically reference the transcripts to your contract and your scope document of what was agreed upon. And then I try to identify any instances where something extra was asked for. And then if something extra was asked for that does not reference your scope doc, it then creates a ping. It pings you, maybe on Slack or Teams or whatever, and goes, hey, client mentioned they want an extra 70 videos, or they want you to build these workflows. They want you to write these automations, or they want you to actually go and order 100 other pieces of lumber, right? Whatever it is for your business. By doing this, you're able to identify areas where upsell actually can occur, where they've already shown implicit interest and desire for something that wasn't initially within the previous scope. Now, you can then decide to call it out in your meeting and go, hey, Susie, I understand you wanted this thing. Typically, we would charge for it, but we really like working with you. Happy to do this at a reduced rate, as we've already sort of got these things. Instead of it being like $2,500, we'll do it for this. You could just do that, right? If you want to do that, or you can be like, hey, Susie, I appreciate you reaching out about this piece. It's going to cost this if you want us to do it. Like, you handle the sales delivery mechanism on how you want to handle that. But it's a clear area of winning. It's highly dependent on your business. But scope creep detection first mitigates your team from doing unnecessary work, and then gives you a way to create a feedback loop of positive reinforcement of helping to drive that sale forward and doing additional expansion. This here, client scoring, this actually leans into the transcripts and the emails and the Slack messages and the speed in which tasks are being done in your PM tool. All of these things together create a health score, right? And things are either going good and we're happy, or they're not going good and they're pissed off, or clearly some frustration and they are sad or frustrated. Typically, they're just frustrated more so than sad. But you want to mitigate these issues as early and efficiently as possible, or just move the client out of the way and not work with them anymore. Because sometimes a bad client's a bad client and you don't want to waste your time, and you just go, here's your fucking money. Have a great life. I'll talk to you later. And so this here is where scoring can help you, especially as you scale, because you as the owner are not going to be in every single conversation. And so how do you get that insight into what's going on across your business? And how do you validate that every client is effectively being taken care of? And the easiest way to do it now is to pull transcripts, pull conversation, store that context in a database, reference that information, and then compare it against your best clients that are always happy with you, right? Whatever those key indicators are, or what you expect the best result of a client, and use that as a top line score for 100%, and then a bottom line score for the inverse of that. And then you'll be able to get a reference value of where they're at in that stream. So if they hit a certain point, you want to make sure that you maybe jump on, join that call, start a conversation, do a follow-up, handle the lead and the opportunity in some way, shape, or form. And then this renewal expansion. Renewal expansion, such an easy win. This cyclically talks about scope creep, really. But what can happen is you do this scope creep, you automatically can take this information, do an expansion offer, and if you've got a service that can be provided on a renewal basis, you can then package it and be like, hey, we think we could do this to you on a retainer basis. Here's what it is, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, for the renewal aspect, you've got an instance where you know that you've got contracts coming up and you want to automatically do your outreach with a person. So that way you've got a pre-follow-up before the deal just becomes dead, right? And so you can create automations here to do, again, cyclical nature of contract expiration date is X. We need to follow up 3 months prior to maintain that deal, keep them going, making sure they're satisfied so that they just roll over, or you handle an upsell and expansion into a new deal. So this has been a lot of information, guys. There is a lot here. I've got a lot of scribbles. There's a lot of context here. So I hope that this has been helpful, but I fundamentally think that if you take some time, maybe watch this video twice, maybe get rid of the 9-minute intro that I made, and start taking time to diagnose what's happening in your business, how it's happening, why it's going on that way, when and where you should probably be putting processes in place, and then identify and follow the steps of how you should implement a automation or workflow to make it better, I think is going to fundamentally improve the way that you run your business. If you want help doing this stuff, check the link down below. I've got a link to some stuff. We've actually got an audit we can do to help you get clarity on what's going on. Also, I've got some documentation so you can help do some stuff yourself. All right. I hope this has been very helpful. If you guys want anything else, put them down in the comments below. I really appreciate your time. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.